Phillip Carter is Senior Fellow, Counsel and Director of the Military Veterans and Society Program at the Center for New American Security. His research focuses on issues facing veterans and military personnel, force structure, and readiness issues in civil-military relations. Mr. Carter began his career as an Army officer, serving for several years in the active and reserve components as a military police and civil affairs officer. After retiring from the Army, Mr. Carter became increasingly involved in veterans and national security policy issues. In 2008, he joined the Obama campaign as a National Veterans Director, responsible for policy and political engagement with the veterans and military community. Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Congressman Cummings and members of the committee. It's an honor to appear before you as someone who's worn our nation's uniform and now comes to speak to you about national security. We have a sacred commitment to provide for the nation's common defense, and this commitment dates back to the founding of our republic. The foundation of this commitment is a strong military enabled by smart defense budgets driven by strategy, not sequestration, a cutting-edge innovation and technology agenda, smart, effective strategy, and the best all-volunteer force in the world, supported by our nation, including our service members, veterans, and their families. Secretary Clinton, our next president, has said that the president has a sacred responsibility to send our troops into battle only if we must, and only with a clear and well-thought-out strategy. She's right. The democratic vision for a strong and sustained military, acting judiciously in the world and consistently with our values, is the American way. She's also noted, and I agree, that it would be a serious mistake to stumble into another costly ground war in the Middle East, a place where many served, including me, and a place where we still have men and women deployed in harm's way. People and nations must secure their own communities. We must support them, but we cannot substitute for them in Iraq and Afghanistan. Nonetheless, our military must be the best trained and equipped in the world, standing ready to provide for our nation's defense in a range of scenarios, from counterinsurgency to counterterrorism, from humanitarian assistance to high-end combat operations. We have the finest military in the world, but we cannot afford to take this excellence for granted. We must invest in our military to sharpen its edge and continuously sharpen its edge. We must also invest in our Defense Department, reforming it, making it more agile, efficient, and effective. We must root out waste, fraud, and abuse. We must protect whistleblowers and empower inspectors general, giving them the tools they need to ensure that our Pentagon spends our taxpayer dollars in the best way. And finally, we must also look after those who serve us in uniform and their families. We cannot just think of defense as strategy and hardware. It is people too, and we have a sacred commitment to these people that begins with the moment they enlist and continues for the rest of their lives. It continues not just in the Defense Department, but in the Department of Veterans Affairs as well, with timely access to quality health care, benefits like the post-9/11 GI Bill, and disability compensation, to make sure that we serve these men and women and their families as well as they have served us. Members of the committee, it's a pleasure to represent these issues to you, and I stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I am hopeful that we will have a very, very strong plank with regard to our veterans. I often say that everybody salutes them when they go off to war, and then when they come back, they're not treated the way they should be treated. And we can be better, and we can do better. And so I want to thank you very much. Questions? Ms. Sherman.
First of all, thank you for your service. And thank all of the veterans for all of their service, and thank the families for their support for the veterans, because I know even among diplomats, it's the families that really suffer as much as the veteran for what people have to go through. We have heard from Mr. Trump that nobody has a better friend than he to the veteran community, that, you know, we all know the saga of the fundraiser. You know, it's not clear to me that he's ever really been a supporter in the past. And I think he has a notion that he can somehow say, this is a high priority, it'll just get done, trust me, it'll get done. But you are presenting testimony about the complexity of getting this done and the skills that it takes to get this done. So I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Thank you, Ambassador Sherman, for that question. I think the danger that candidate Trump presents occurs in at least three dimensions. One, the unwillingness to accept candid military advice and to engage in a civil-military dialogue with our military leaders. That reflects a naivete about both the process and the substance of national security. I think second is a disregard for the hard work and substance of national security and the issues that my colleague, Mr. Cicerone, discussed recently, the issues that you've worked and many others. These are hard issues and they cannot be addressed simply with bumper stickers. And I think third is the respect for the community that we see absent in his statements, treating veterans as props to be trotted out on stage, as opposed to a community that served this country and is deserving of their support. These are the reasons why I have extreme concern about Mr. Trump and his candidacy, and why I think that there is only one party and one candidate who is qualified and has the judgment and the temperament to be commander-in-chief.
Ms. Lee.
Thank you very much. Let me associate myself with all of the remarks that have been made, and thank you very much for your service and for being here. I am the daughter of a veteran, 25 years, lieutenant colonel in the Army. I also serve on the subcommittee on military construction and veterans affairs. So, you know, we have tried to wrap our hands around what we need to do to make sure we honor our veterans once they return. You mentioned a clear and well thought out strategy when we send our troops in harm's way, and I'm wondering if you could comment on how you see Congress's role and responsibility. Some of us believe that Congress has a duty to our veterans and to our country, a constitutional responsibility to pass an authorization to use military force and not use old authorizations to, put our troops in harm's way, because the public needs to understand the costs and consequences as our troops do. So I'd like you to comment on what you think about the congressional responsibility, as well as with regard to waste, fraud, and abuse. You know, the Pentagon still hasn't been audited, and we've been working, Democrats, and we've been leading this for years now with Republicans on board to try to get the Pentagon audited. There's a requirement that it be audited. It's the only federal agency that's been audited. We have billions of dollars that are being wasted, which could be used to support our veterans' health care, personnel costs, but yet we can't get an audit of the Pentagon. So could you comment on the necessity or how you see this audit responsibility?
Thank you, Congresswoman Lee.
I don't know whether this is a signal that we need to leave or what. The light suddenly came on. Good.
It was the Congresswoman's question, I believe.
Maybe it's because, Congresswoman Lee.
It's a terrific question. On the issue of an AUMF, the Constitution allocates war powers to all branches of the government, including Congress. And I believe very strongly that each branch has its role to play, whether it's the authorization of the use of military force or otherwise. But Congress's responsibility doesn't stop there. It continues with passage each year of a National Defense Authorization Act, timely passage of a budget, appropriate policy guidance for leaders of the Defense Department and leaders of the military to execute. And the absence of this timely, efficient process hurts our national security. There is very little stability and predictability in resource allocation across the department. The department has operated more years than not on a continuing resolution. That has an impact on procurement, that has an impact on spending. It actually creates more inefficiency, I believe, when the Congress doesn't timely and efficiently pass these bills. So yes, I believe the AUMF is important, but the responsibility does not stop there. With respect to an audit, there is very clearly more that we can do to run the Defense Department like a business, to run it in a way that is appropriate and legible and auditable for the taxpayer, and to make sure that every dollar we spend is going to the national security interest and that we don't have waste, fraud, and abuse. So there is absolutely a role for auditability.
Ms. Tandon. Dr. West. Dr. West.
I just want to salute you in your public work in uniform, military uniform, as well as civilian clothes. But I heard you say that you were committed to protecting whistleblowers. And I was wondering what your definition would. I'm thinking of Edward Snowden, my dear brother, my dear sister Chelsea Manning, my dear brother Jeffrey Sterling, 2 in jail, 1 outside of the country. Would you define them as whistleblowers, or would you define them in a different way?
Dr. West,
Did I put you on the spot too much, though, brother?
very penetrating question.
No, I
and
appreciate your reflections.
I would define whistleblowers as those individuals who come forward consistent with our statutes for protection of whistleblowing activity to the appropriate authorities with the appropriate clearances to adjudicate those matters. It's my understanding that our government has designated Mr. Snowden and before him Private Manning to be not whistleblowers, to be in one case someone who is accused and convicted of violating the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and in another case someone who's been accused of violations of federal law. I believe those individuals had a pathway through their chains of command or their bureaucracies to report wrongdoing. If they saw wrongdoing, they should have taken it, and if they took that and reported it to the appropriate authorities, they should have been protected, as we should protect whistleblowers who report wrongdoing through channels.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, sir.